Got it. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am delighted to have with me Rashid Rana, one of the leading artists of his generation in South Asia. He's the maker of an entirely new kind of art from Pakistan at the turn of the century. And he's exhibited extensively nationally and internationally in public and private collections across the world, including the British Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, the Fukuoka Museum of Art in Japan, the Saatchi Collection, naming a few. He's also the recipient of the Game Changer Asia Art Award. And very recently, he received the most prestigious Sitara-e-Imtiaz conferred by the President of Pakistan. He occupies multiple simultaneous profiles and works as an educator, a curator, and a visual artist, and is currently the Dean of the School of Visual Arts and Design at the Beacon House National University, and also was the founding member of the institution. I often wonder that it's not easy to be a star because once you become a star, you lose your ability to surprise every time. But with Rashid, I have to say that he does not lose the ability to surprise us every time with all these projects that make us so that just make us wonder about his thought process. This particular presentation will be primarily talking about his latest project at the Pakistan Pavilion for the exterior skin he designed at the Dubai Expo 2020. And we'll be connecting his current practice, his current project, his current artistic intervention with all his previous portfolio. So this particular project at the Pakistan Pavilion created this extraordinary spectacle for all of us. And it captivated the audience in a way that has never done before. It stole the hearts of many. And with no further delay, I'd like to hear Rashid Rana about how it all began.
Thank you, Rabeya, for your kind introduction. Yes, it all began almost 3 years ago when Razak Daud Sahab formed a committee led by Shahid Abdullah Sahab, the renowned architect from Karachi and philanthropist. And so he, and then there was a curatorial review committee comprising of Yaver Jalani Sahab and then Mehboob Khan. So they approached me and they told me that, this project is in the making and we would like you to transform the architecture into an artwork. So they wanted me to, that was my mandate, that's the task I was given. And of course, the context is such that, in the middle of, amongst so many pavilions, which are 192 as we know now, you have to create something which is very, kind of crowd puller, and yet it has to be meaningful as well. And so that is the challenge that I was given, and it was meant to be from the beginning an artistic intervention. So the idea was to have this unique feature to our pavilion amongst this galaxy of other pavilions, to present it as an artwork itself, rather than mere architecture. That's how it all started.
Yes. So how did you arrive to this particular idea?
Well, initially the expectation was by the people who invited me and myself too, I have to say, to create something, a gigantic scale of mosaic kind of a thing, banking on my earlier works to create a macro form, representing a macro image and comprising of thousands of smaller images. That's what initially I was thinking of doing. And one of the possibilities could have been to have images from diverse kind of images representing Pakistan from all over the country, and them coming together to form another macro image. And I did take that route for a while because it's a really long project, almost 3 years, as I mentioned. But more time I spent with the project, I realized that I will continue with this micro sort of, visual strategy.
Understanding.
But I just thought more time I spent with this project, I realized that it has to speak a very simple language. A building with lots of images, recognizable representational images might not work and I'm glad I stuck to my this idea and made it rather more abstract and simple, as opposed to forcing too much photographic imagery onto a building.
Okay. And in one of our kind of informal chats, you were talking about how it has linkages with your previous project, your series of projects called Desperately Seeking Paradise. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, I mean, one of the goal for me was the primary goal that I set for myself was to break the monotony and the solidity of the mass, the architectural mass, because to serve a particular function, the building wasn't carrying any windows or any kind of transparency or perforation, because it had to provide maximum wall space within the pavilion for the exhibition. So we were left with, in terms of architectural form, a very solid concrete sort of mass. And I wanted to break that solidity with the help of, this visual device that I have used previously in works such as Desperately Seeking Paradise, HOC, House of Cards. I think some of the audience must have seen these works, where I combine the reflective surface with the printed surface and use certain geometry to have the complexity of the two, printed and the reflective, going to create a kind of some sort of feeling of transparency or perforation, to make the building sort of breathe and become a bit lighter. So, but in doing so, conceptually, what I arrived to is to use each individual unit as an individual in a collective or in a country, like जैसे अफराद होते हैं, फर्द होते हैं किसी भी कौम में, माशरे में, a group of people में, and how they come together with all their differences and similarities, and how they unify together. So एक जो इसका टाइटल है उर्दू में वादतल शहूद, जिसको अंग्रेजी में हम कह सकते हैं यूनिटी ऑफ ऑल दैट अपीयर्स. so inherently जो है जो inherent feature है unity all creation का. So it kind of refers to that, and also refers to the idea that unity, जो diversity है. I mean, Pakistan is a very, very diverse country, and we must acknowledge that, not only climatically or geographically, in topography की sense में, लेकिन उसके अलावा जो उसी वजह से जो कौमें बसती हैं, जो मुख्तलिफ अफराद बसते हैं, groups of people, ethnicities हैं, racially फ़र्क हैं, बहुत ही diverse है within the for a small country. So वो जो उस diversity को cherish करना और recognize करना बुनियाद है मेरी नज़र में unity की, जो अक्सर fear करते हैं ऐसा कोई लोग के diverse होने को या मुख्तलिफ इख्तलाफ होने को या मुख्तलिफ होने को. ये तो बुनियाद है, बल्कि ये एक जुज़ है, एक inherent feature है unity का, हमें कायनात से पता चलता है. So this is something I wanted to, for instance, these 24,000 units, each one of them is fractionally different. जब पास से देख रहे हो, दूर से देखेंगे तो बहुत फर्क नजर आते हैं, but they all come together in some sort of harmonious order.
Okay, बिल्कुल. आपने सादगी की बात की. You talked about simplicity, and I'd just like you to talk a little more about the idea that apparently all these forms and these magnanimous structures appear they're seemingly very simple, but they often unfold into very complex narratives, and there is a kind of there's fragmentation, there's layering, there's geometry, there's depth, there's perforation. So you have these very crisp decisions going on all the time. Is there a kind of a method, a structure to your thinking that makes possible something so simple looking yet so complex in its formation?
Well, back in the late 90s, I decided one thing. पहले मेरा ख्याल ये था, मैं अपने उस्ताद मेरे मेंटर ज़हूर साहब के काम से बहुत इंस्पायर्ड था, और चूँकि वो एक लंबे अरसे तक पेंटर रहे, अब कुछ लोग उनके काम से वाकिफ़ ज़्यादा कर रहे हैं, तो मुझे शायद ये लगा कि जो अच्छा काम है वो सिर्फ चंद लोग ही अप्रिशिएट करते हैं, उनकी महदूद ऑडियंस होती है. And then soon I realized that I had this desire in me कि I wanted to engage with the wider audience. तो मैंने कुछ फैसले किए अपने दिमाग में, जो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता they resulted in the kind of work that you're familiar with now. और फैसले ये किए थे कि मैंने I wanted my work to be seemingly very simple. अपनी उसकी पहली appearance में वो बहुत उसमें सादगी हो, simple हो. Even if it runs a risk of becoming a one-liner or something didactic, I wanted to take that risk. तो ये सोच के साथ मैंने deliberately जो imagery और visual strategies इस तरह से choose की जो कि आम फहम हो और आसानी से relate कर सकते हो, wider audience engage कर सकते हो, मुश्किल ना हो अपनी पहली appearance में. अगर उसमें कोई डीपर कंटेंट है, कोई कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी है, तो वो अनफोल्ड हो सकती है एट वेरियस डिफरेंट स्टेजेस. So this is the desire. I started off my practice or shifted my practice and my thinking in the late 90s, and I think later on, in a few years, after a few years, it resulted in this photo mosaic series.
So so I have prepared a small presentation. Actually, it's not small, since you have like a huge practice. It was very difficult to contain all your images. I made a little presentation that talks about exactly what you're talking about right now, your idea of the macro and the micro, and how these ideas of dichotomy and duality and duplicity come in. So let's have a quick look at all of these, and so that, and we run through and share with our audience what has been going on, and what is it that you actually mean when you say the micro and the macro. This particular very iconic image, Rashid, would you like to talk about it yourself?
I'm not sure if you have the time. I think we're already running short of time, so I think you can just quickly go through.
Okay. So all these, the image that you see, the macro image you see, is composed of all these very, very tiny images.
I think they're very self-explanatory. As I said, I don't think you have time. So if you can,
just run through them.
This is like I love miniature. That the images. This is another work, Umatitia series, where now you're jumping the slides. Yeah, this is offshore account made of images of trash from a landfill site.
Yeah, this is an image of an urban scape that is made of tiny images.
Where I chose particular sites within Lahore, mostly developed architecture from early 20th century. But photographs were taken from the given time, and they are comprising of images in the 24 hours of their life of these buildings. Yeah, it's almost moving image in a way. I mean,
this particular image is made out of images of graffiti of all walls of Lahore.
Not only graffiti, is all the kind of text that existed in the city of Lahore for the period of 2 years, whether it's signboards or wall chalking or posters, and it all comes together in language series, which brings many references from art history as well.
Okay, let's move on. This particular work is also
this is the work
manifestation of the whole.
Earlier. This is the work I was referring to earlier, Desperately Seeking Paradise, in which, can we go one slide back?
Yeah.
This is how you first encounter this work, the reflective side, and then when you move around it 180 degree, then image starts appearing from these pigeonholes. Can we see the next slides? Can we see the next slide? Yeah. And then when you complete the 180 degree turn, and then you see, so this duplicity, this duality of the printed surface and the reflective surface, where you can see yourself and then see what the image is being presented to you. It happens simultaneously. But from certain angles, it looks like a very minimalist geometric abstract sculpture from 1960s. From the other side, it's very representational image. So, but this very formal device, I kind of wanted to use in this work for the expo, though it resulted in a very different fashion. So it doesn't carry these kind of pigeonholes, but the principle is basically the same. And this is how one idea,
manifests into the
develops into another idea, and
how it kind of segues into the other.
I had no clue when I started working for the Expo project that this would actually evolve into something like that. But it all began with this work being the inspiration or something. It borrows from this work.
The springboard, kind of. Okay, and then so you know, in all these works, there's this constant idea of you know, this harmonious relationship between the collective and the individual, and the whole kind of becoming and the whole and its parts kind of becoming one. This is again work that has micro
And it's
images
mostly
of
in some of these
slaughterhouse.
earlier mosaic series are the relationship of the macro and micro is often very contradictory, and they sometimes they represent some sort of binaries, and but we soon realize, because of this coexistence and confrontation of the binaries, I attempt to expose the absurdity of presumed absolutes. Binaries are often seen as presumed absolutes. So the idea is to expose their absurdity, and the narrative actually lies between the two extremes, within the two extremes.
And yeah, and it's interesting how, you know, this idea of the grid also has been has manifested kind of constantly in your work, and particularly in this transliteration series. Would you like to talk about this one, because this is relatively recent?
Yeah, it's well, this too is 2012, from 10 years old now. But the some of the works that we're not seeing over here from the early 90s are those grid series of mine, where it's absolutely, there's no representational image as such. It's all x-axis and y-axis kind of lines coming together to seek depth within the very two-dimensionality. So this, but even those works, they carried duality of space. You know, so within the very depth, very two-dimensionality, the depth was made to exist. So this, but this interesting duality later on expanded into this whole series of photo mosaics that you have seen. Transliteration series is slightly different than the mosaic series, where in mosaic series you see thousands of images building a macro image. But over here in transliteration series, I take an image from a certain time and place, I cut it into smaller fragments, digitally of course, and then reassemble them to evoke the sensibility or to make it resemble to an image from another time in another place. And that's how, you know, that's hence the word, the title transliteration is really an act of transliteration, where the actual image doesn't disappear, it stays there. And then unlike the mosaic series, in transliteration, you can see the tension, surface tension is slightly different between the macro and the micro. You can see both at the same time.
And you know, so after this, and I know that things were happening parallel as well, but it took like a slight turn, and it kind of expanded its dimension into photo sculptures and video installations. So let's talk about those. And yet again, you know, they're manifesting your bigger ideas of the dichotomy and the duality of existence. This particular work won the Karachi Biennale Best Practice Award.
It was a jury prize, yeah, for the last Biennale.
It was a juried prize, which was inspired by a painting. Rashid, would you like to talk about that a little?
Yeah, David Caspar Frederick's painting. It's an allegorical sort of representation of the same idea, where I've replaced the landscape with the landfill site in Karachi, outside Karachi.
So this was a beautifully moving video, and you could only kind of sense it once we were there in the space.
In the slide that you're showing, the next one, this is how these are stills from this video, performative video from various segments, and it basically
how long was your footage? How long did you have to stand here?
About an hour. I stood still.
And it's a garbage dump. It's a landfill site. Great. Okay. So then we're here talking about all these video installations, and let's quickly talk about your photo sculptures. And
I'm glad you have put together these images, which because often audience, because this photo mosaic series kind of has become a kind of branding of mine, whereas I have remained open to various kind of possibilities and ideas vis-a-vis formats. I mean, my practice more and more became idea driven over a period of time. So it's the ideas that lead the way, and if it requires a certain kind of medium or format, I opt for it, and not the other way around. So these works that you're showing, various video works and photo sculptures, they've been actually happening simultaneously to mosaic series and transliteration series. But there is some sort of progression here in terms of these photo sculptures that we're seeing on the screen. They've later on evolved into works like the one you're just about to show, this one, which is a room from Tate Modern. So you see within the gallery, another gallery space. So the spaces that we use in present era to exhibit art, I'm using that as a subject matter and created it as a photo sculpture. So a photo sculpture that surrounds you. So
photo sculpture that took in the scale of
you. You become part of
architectural.
And I think this
and this particular work, as I recall, was a kind of food for thought for something that was yet to come in the form of your very grand project at the Venice Biennale that was called The Viewing, the Viewer, and the Viewed. Let's share a few images of that. Taking the idea of these photo sculptures into
that project was called Transpositions, but this particular image that you're showing, if we can go back one image, I think that might give a better idea. Yeah, this one, and then the next one, please.
The next.
The two rooms. Next film. I created a replica. Next one, please. No, the one after this. Yeah, this one. So I created a replica of this room from Palazzo Benzone, a 17th century Palazzo Benzone in Venice. I created the images that you see on the left-hand side is the replica of that room in Lahore, and the one you see on the right-hand side is the room in Italy. So the two were connected through live streaming. It's like seeing yourself. People who were coming in on a walk-in basis in Lahore and in Venice, they would find themselves as in a situation where you're seeing yourself in the mirror and suddenly find somebody else there, kind of a situation. So this is it's a work where audience becomes the work in a way, and the title was The Viewing, the Viewer, and the Viewed, and in the Urdu, which is the Urdu title comes from एक शेर है गालिब का, उससे आता है असले शहूदो शाहिदो मशहूद एक हैं, हैरा हूँ फिर के मुशाहिदा है किस हिसाब में. So
so this reminds me that this particular title in its Urdu version is very similar to your Expo project, which and aren't they very similar? Something to do with the mashhood.
The word shahood is different. Is similar, and in fact, in meaning as well. गालिब का जो शेर है, जो उसका एक मिसरा बांगे दरा में इकबाल ने भी इस्तेमाल किया बाद में, is basically talks about the inherent unity in all creation, and that is what is happening in the Expo work that I'm calling as Wadat al-Shuhud. Urdu में हमने help ली courtesy Risham Sayyid, उनके legendary जो poet हैं, उनके वालिद साहब नजम हुसैन सैयद, the Punjabi foremost Punjabi poet हैं. They kind of helped me with the translation of. I had in mind Wahadat al-Shuhud, and then I was seeking a simple translation of it, so something very literal and ba muhavra at the same time. So he came up with this phrase, unity of all that appears.
Yes, Rashid, to Galil ka sher bhi pad dein, please. It was so beautiful and kind of so nicely
I didn't hear it. असले शहूदो शाहिदो मशहूद एक हैं, हैरा हूँ फिर कि मुशाहिदा है किस हिसाब में.
Wow, beautiful. I mean, it's the way you look, it's the way you observe. So beautifully said, Rashid. But the interesting baat ye hai ki aapke kaam mein, you're constantly evolving all these visual strategies and conceptually and visually, and hence you always kind of open to possibilities. Let's talk about your curatorial projects that have come about through these very large collaborations. This particular project at the Royal Opera House, again, is about the grid and the angle of viewing. Would you like to share a little about it for the audience who hasn't seen this work before?
It's a project by Wayne McGregor, a renowned choreographer and the resident choreographer for Royal Opera House London. He's an amazing artist because he likes to collaborate with other creative practitioners. For this particular project, it's a three-way collaboration with me and Steve Reich, the legendary musician from US. So his piece from 1965 and a present piece was given to me by Wayne to respond to that and come up with a visual concept. And I came up with a visual concept around which he designed his choreography. The piece is something to do with Noah's biblical account, and is the allegory of it, or connecting it with the Syrian refugees crossing the ocean. So there's some imagery, and then concept is something to do with that. So this wedge-like form that you see is sort of almost looks like some part of the big boat or something. But that wasn't the only reason for me to conceive. Do you have more images?
Yes. Should I show you this one or this one?
This one, I think this is the basic canvas that I created. This grid that you see suspended in the air is actually exists in three-dimensionally in the space. So it only looks from this vantage point. It looks like a suspended flat grid, but it's actually three-dimensional. I'm owed to the amazing team of Opera House, set designers who helped create these lines in micromillimeter difference. So to create this.
Yes, you see, again, even with the expo, there, we've heard this, that they're fractionally different in their size and their color. So were you like a mathematician in your previous life?
I must give credit to people who helped me realize these ideas, especially for this project and as well as Expo project. The two people I must mention, three people in fact, Uzair Faruqi, who's an architect and a very creative individual, and urban planner. So then we have Tariq Ali, who's an architect and visualizer, 3D visualizer, and we have Kamran Nabil, who is a graphics person. So I owe it to, and then all the people, like for Expo project, we worked with this company named Dynamic Motion, and also the on-ground project coordinator, Mr. Javed Idris. And then, like over here, there's a huge team of the Royal Opera House set designers and various practitioners. So yes, I mean, it's often I end up working in a teamwork situation, and where I need contributors or collaborators to work with.
But that's the beauty of collaboration, you see.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of collaboration, where you're working with multiple minds and you're able to bring something that eventually becomes so coherent, and it converges into one larger unit that becomes so experientially kind of vivid and a treat to look at. Let's just look at a few images of this. And maybe also, if we have time, if you could run us through your other curatorial projects, one being Reassemble, the other being...
Extraordinary is another project, which is a continuation of the same idea. I like to weave together works, because I like, see, in a curation, you have to keep the identity and individuality, और उसकी जो इंफरादियत है काम की और आर्टिस्ट की, वो अलग रहनी चाहिए. But no matter how you bring the works together, they form new associations and new meanings. So to me, curation is essentially that. How do you sequence them and how you bring them together while keep maintaining their individuality? So both Reassemble, and Extraordinary, though both the shows are about creating a maze-like space, a linear sort of journey, where one work leads to another work because of some similarity between the two. And then how this is how a narrative is sort of woven through from work number one to the last work in both these shows. And then the image that you were showing, the present elsewhere, there is I'm not sure whether it's an artistic project or a curatorial project, because for that's a very different kind of undertaking. No, I'm talking about Present Elsewhere, the book. The show exists in the form of a PDF. This is a downloadable PDF. Anybody can download it from the Art Asia Archive website, where I collaborated with 15 minds, and they contributed their ideas by assuming that they exist in another time and place, other different to where they are located and where they are born. And they imagine a work in that time, and they propose the idea in written or textual or visual form, and then this work brings together as a PDF publication, and that is the work.
Okay, so again, apparently, apparently your practice is kind of taking all these very dramatic turns, but they're kind of very nicely and very smoothly interwoven with these common threads that kind of gel all your work together. One particular project, again, a very recent undertaking, was at the Manchester International Festival, MIF, and it is there when you announced or coined a new word called "ert," and which talks about moments of creative expression in daily life, and we all were kind of very curious to know how this kind of deviation took place, and that this term also comes with a manifesto of possibilities. Let's talk about that, but before that, I'd like to share with the audience a few images of it. So that's the image of the Manifesto of Possibilities. I've tried to go through this a million times, and every time I see, and I get to kind of see more, and it still remains very, very cryptic. So maybe you could elaborate on it for all of us in very simple words, or what that really meant for you. But let me quickly go through these images. So there were 3 projects under the Manchester International Festival that recently happened. One was called The Mind is Global, which was about advert-free living. And Rashid will talk about this in a bit. The other project was 1001 Minds Global. And the last one was Exit Global, which was which was real estate development. Rashid, please iske bare mein hame thodi si detail mein bataएं. Would you like me to kind of go back to these slides one by one?
But I think art is a project that requires a whole separate session. I hope we have one, or we find ways to have a public session about it in the near future. Because this project, the ideas that come together in this entire project, they go back even more than 10 years. So these are the ideas that I've been working with for last 10 years or so, and they nicely come together in this project thanks to Manchester International Festival, who commissioned me and supported me to give this idea a form. But over here, I'm talking about something, I'm proposing something outside of the discipline of art. Because there's one thing common, what we call art throughout the human history, though it's a fairly new term. Art is a recent idea, but through that lens, we call everything art from the past as well. But what is common in all those creations, what we call art, that they are all images and objects, and they are mimicking of life, whether it's storytelling or film or video or drawing or painting. These are all mimicking of life, and they all have poetics in it, in some sort of structure or form is such that they carry poetics, they carry this novelty. But what about poetics taking place in not mimicking of life, but life itself? Art, the discipline of art does explain that to some extent in the performance art and in what we recently known as relational aesthetics, but still all of this seek validity from the institution and discipline of art. I was, through this manifesto, I'm proposing that if we can liberate the discussion of expression or self-expression from the discipline of art, if it can become independent of that. And then we can start seeing the strength of expression in various different disciplines, various manifestation of human activities and actions, mediations, transactions of various different kind. they can be time bound, they can be unlimited, as well in terms of time. So the concept could encompass a number of things, but just to illustrate my understanding of Earth in a given time, or just to illustrate with the possibilities of it, I chose to present 3 business ideas. And that's what you see here. There are the names and logos of these 3 concepts, which is minus local, is a chain of grocery stores, proposed chain of grocery stores, and this was realized there as a concept proof physically. Whereas the other 2 ideas were just presented as concept note and with the help of visuals in the exhibition and presentation format, which is a new concept for a new social media platform, 1001 Minds, and a concept for a DIY franchise for a planet-wide chain of groceries, the chain of housing development, which is called Exit Local Micro Cities. Through this project, potentially various different kind of micro cities can be created all over the planet in a DIY franchise, sort of model, which also uses an NFT based, transactional model as well. And it's nothing is sort of permanent. There's no concept of permanent residence in this one. But anyway, these are the ideas which require, because I mean, these are the ideas which I've worked with the help of various collaborators, people like Madiha Lagari, Hala Bashir, and then a number of contributors, about 30, 35 people. And one thing I will never forget about this project that I specifically, the ideas existed for over 10 years for now, but specifically I worked for 6 months, the first 6 months of this year, dedicatedly for a number of hours. I worked with all these different minds, more than 30, 35 individuals, all over Zoom. This was all through Zoom. And that was the only form of engagement. And sadly, I could not even travel for the opening of the show because of the traveling restrictions due to COVID. So the project, from in its initial idea and commissioning to its delivery and realization and exhibition, it all happened for me remotely from this room next door where I sit and then do all my Zoom calls. So it literally produced and then developed over Zoom.
So the common thread in all of these, yet again, are ideas about, they're non-prescriptive notions of identity that defy hard lines.
The couple of common things in all these ideas are that all 3 ideas have a very utopian aspiration, but they have a very mass appeal because they're all possible ideas. They're all viable ideas. They can be if anyone is interested, any big investor or anyone who wants to carry these and actually want to realize these ideas, it's very much possible, and they're viable ideas. But they all kind of present the notion of one planet, one country. It's probably sort of this desire in my head. I think all artists, all creative minds, they kind of defy political borders. The world that we live in, where it's human movement of humans, and the basic fundamental right of migration is so will be restricted. So I think it's probably these ideas stem from my desire of and then all these business models are called global in the name of Exit Global, 1001 Mind Global, and minus global. Locality is interesting for me as a concept where one is not denying the fact that we live in a shrunken global village. It is true, and the many things that we do over on this planet are similar. But at the same time, there are local contexts which I refer to as people's choice, not in terms of ethnicity or heritage and tradition. I'm not to confuse with that when I say local. Local context really simply means a group of people in a certain location on the planet may have different views about certain things, and they may have a different set of choices they can make. So the democracy aspect of it. So I think if this world has this planet has to move towards one country kind of a thing in the future, I think locality, the acceptance of individual units and respect of individual units is essential to that.
Yes, and this work also, the series of work is also kind of defying very hard political borders, and so you need to really have a group of visionaries as wise as you, and to really kind of make this possible. And I'm sure you will find people, because you're kind of the king of collaboration. Okay, so another interesting thing about all these projects is you seeking wider audiences, and you kind of really looking into more inclusive spaces of interaction and thinking and creating also, where the audience becomes an active participant. And it's interesting how we see this yet again in your Dubai Expo, Pakistan Pavilion project, where people who came in to view the work actually became part of it, and it created this sensation. It was a social media sensation. It still is. How do you take it? How do you feel about this, where the audience is kind of owning and possessing this work as if it's their own?
As I said earlier, that it is my desire to have my work engage a wider audience, because art, I very early on realized that is a very elitist activity. By default, it is that way. So the idea is to perhaps art in moving away from the discourse of art and then creating and hoping to have another parallel discourse is probably उसी सिलसिले की एक कड़ी है कि जहाँ पे मैं wider engagement चाह रहा हूँ, जो कि आर्ट में आमतौर पे नहीं होती है. जो आपने इस एक्सपो का जिक्र किया, एक्सपो का आई थिंक I experienced something entirely new, and I must confess it does feel good as well, because past में अगर कोई भी किसी किस्म की achievements हैं जो कि आपको satisfy करती हैं कि जी आपको किसी चीज़ पे कोई critically किसी ने appraisal मिला, किसी ने अच्छा लिख दिया, या कोई award मिल गया, या किसी म्यूजियम में आपको काम एग्जिबिट हुआ, so they're satisfying things. But यहाँ पे क्या हुआ कि there's a new feeling that I experienced कि audience is taking feeling proud and they feeling very happy. It's like you as if you're playing for somebody. As an artist, I never experienced that you're playing for somebody. You're making work in your own, for your own practice and for yourself. But over here, I experienced as if you are playing for someone. This is like footballers or cricketers, and now I know how they must feel, and in both ways, हार जाए जीत जाए, लेकिन यहाँ पे somehow it really worked, and it made so many people happy. I can't tell you the kind of messages I've been receiving from people who I didn't know, from not just social media, but I don't know where people are getting my phone number, and how they feel about this project. It did really make me happy, because as a country, Pakistan, as a group of people, we have been a bad brand, since the war on terror for wrong reasons, and I think people do want to be represented, and they should be they are to be understood and not perceived differently. So if I played some tiny part in it, I'm very glad I stuck to the task. The project was very challenging, Expo project. It got cancelled a couple of times and wasn't sure it was happening. And then I was tempted to quit the project due to various, sort of challenges there. But I'm glad I stayed with the project and achieved what we were meant to achieve. And it really worked, and it made so many people happy. And that is very satisfying in a very different way.
Thank you so much, Rashid. I wish we had more time to talk about all these things in detail, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. And I will have to conclude by saying that thank you so much for making us realize the power of images. And thank you so much for giving us new dimensions thank you so much for giving us new dimensions of what it means to be an artist, and kind of giving us new ways of looking at the role and position of an artist, and also raising the bar for all of us. Thank you, and thank you for thank you so much. This is very overwhelming, and I wish we had more time to take this forward, but another time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rabeya. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Hafiz.